More full days before that election, Aldrin, perhaps give us a roundup of the logistics that are being put together in Zimbabwe. This is in the midst of the various concerns that different agencies have raised about readiness for this election.
Well, it has been a busy morning here in Harare ahead of the elections. 3 days, people counting the days, counting down to the minutes and the seconds to the 30th of July, when about 5.5 million Zimbabweans will be heading to the polls, to the 10,000 polling stations across the country to cast the ballots in this historic election. Started off as a busy morning for the president of the country. Emmerson Mnangagwa was also amongst the 23 candidates meeting off with the African Union Observer Mission, as well as the South African Development Community, the SADC, meeting the bloc this morning. And they had to speak about the preparations for the elections, but trying to speak to SADC quite specifically, Antonio Tete, who's the SADC head of this mission, about some credibility issues that SADC has faced. If you remember, back in 2013, there were issues around the credibility of those results, where some have argued that the results were not free and fair. And Antonio Tete is saying that they will remain objective, as they have always been objective. But as I've indicated before, is that if you look at the history, it points to the contrary, including the likes of eNCA, the Botswana president, who had said back in 2013 that the elections were not free and fair. The evidence point to the contrary. And also the African Union, would they be able to regain the trust of Zimbabweans as they go into the polls? Yesterday, speaking to some Zimbabweans, and they also said that they need these observer missions to ensure that the elections are free and fair, and we'll be looking quite closely to those final reports that will be handed down by the observer missions after the elections have been declared and after the results have been made public. And the president was actually supposed to speak to some vendors here in Zimbabwe's Harare this morning, but that did not happen. That's because he was jetting off to South Africa to be part of the BRICS summit that is currently underway. While his nemesis, as some may say, Nelson Chamisa, on the other hand, the MDC Alliance's presidential candidate, was about 34 kilometers, about 30 to 40 kilometers away from Harare, where he was at his 79th rally, really pushing hard to sway voters why they should be voting for the MDC Alliance, why they should be voting for a younger candidate. And you'll remember that they had raised a number of issues with regards to some of the irregularities leading up to the elections, and how they've made the argument that the Electoral Commission is in bed with ZANU-PF. And they remember yesterday, Nelson Chamisa, after making the announcement that they will not be boycotting the elections, said that they will be putting in some mechanisms. And one of those mechanisms that he announced today at that rally is that there will be 44,000 party agents from the MDC Alliance who will be stationed across the plus minus 10,000 polling stations. So if you try to divide that, that would mean that the party will have about 4 members who are represented, or who will be watching out for any irregularities across the polling stations. 4 members of a party in one specific polling station, considering that you have plus minus 10,000 polling stations across the country. Now it is the final push. Of course, later this weekend will be the final push, the final big rallies that will be taking place, and those 2 big rallies will be the one between the MDC Alliance as well as the one of the ZANU-PF. And would they be able, as I said earlier on yesterday as well, would they be able to pull in the voters as their predecessors did, as ZANU-PF's previous leader Robert Mugabe was able to do, as the MDC's previous leader Morgan Tsvangirai was able to do? And quite importantly of these elections is that would these candidates be able to sway the voters and confirm and get their legitimacy, a vote of confidence from the electorate that they are rightfully the leaders of these 2 organizations, considering how they got to the top of these 2 organizations. And now, of course, the fight being who will be at the president's house.